slightly over here because I haven't charged my laptop properly. Appreciated. First item on the agenda is apologies. I don't think we've got any apologies. Good evening. We're all here. Any declarations of interest? No. Okay. As ever, if they arise during the course of discussion, please feel free to interrupt and raise it as soon as you possibly can. It is the Alex and Rob show this evening. So, Councillor Farrell, 2 papers off you, and Strack and 2 off you. So, over to you to start off.
Thanks, Chair.
Item 3. This is the monitoring charges for BNG. I think you're joined by
Kerry.
a couple of officers as well. Kerry, evening, Kerry. And sorry, James here as well. I didn't recognise James because he shaved all his hair.
Both had haircuts. Yeah, thanks. I mean, hopefully this should be quite a nice, simple paper. Basically, you might remember last year the mandatory introduction of BNG, biodiversity net gain. So basically, as a result, with Section 106 agreements, if biodiversity net gain is part of that agreement, there's usually a minimum period of 30 years to monitor the BNG habitats. So basically, as a result, that's quite an administrative burden on the council monitoring that for 30 years. So this paper looks to put a fee on monitoring those Section 106 agreements. The charging structures are in Appendix A of the report, and I'm basically looking to approve the principle of charging those fees on the 106 agreements of BNG. Any questions?
I'm sure there are plenty. Councillor Westall, over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. Really welcome seeing this paper. We can see that it's also mandatory in a lot of the elements. Just for me, the 30 years period is obviously a very long time. And it's just trying to get an understanding of how the charging fees have been arrived at. Have they been benchmarked elsewhere? Just knowing that it is that length of time that we are trying to foresee as well, that fee actually covering into the future, if I can, please.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, well, we've monitored other councils and other organisations who do similar, but I suppose, James, you can probably go into the granular detail of that, or Kerry, whoever wants to do.
Yeah, well, that's fine. So yeah, we had a look at other local authorities within Staffordshire and other local authorities elsewhere in the country that have been very open with their monitoring fees and how they came to them. And locally within some of our neighbouring districts, the sort of method that came out being favoured is one developed by Cannock Chase, where it's based on the total cost of employment of their ecology function, and the total cost of employment of their monitoring officer or whoever in the planning department would handle that. And then that factors in how much time would be spent on a regular monitoring year versus a year where we might have to do a site visit. It's based on, those hours are based on the size of the site, how complex the habitat is, and how difficult it is to deliver. There's a sort of matrix of hours spent. The fees that I then put into that model were provided by finance based on the real salaries and the cost of employment of our team here in the council. And that then gave the fees for that. That then is extrapolated over the 30 years against average inflation over a 30-year period. And then the years when there will be monitoring picked out to add those then together to give the total fee. The applicant, the other party on the agreement, will be getting their money pretty much up front because they sell the biodiversity units. So that's why we've asked for it as well.
Thank you very much indeed for that very comprehensive answer. That's also answered my other questions that were going on. Thank you, much appreciated.
Brilliant. Any more? No? Okay, in which case, thank you. And back to you, Councillor Farrell, for the recommendations.
Thank you. Yeah, those 2 recommendations in my name.
Super. Yeah, that's unanimous. Passed. Thank you very much. And thank you, James, as well. Short and sweet, like that.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Sticking with you then, Councillor Farrell, the local plan update, please.
This is a really exciting update. So the previous stage in our formulation of the next local plan was to do what we call an issues and options document. So basically that took place between the 30th of October and the 11th of December last year. Effectively, this was a series of questions that went out far and wide across the district. We went to schools, we went to community centres, pubs, we had lots of drop-in surgeries, just to try and get to as many people as possible to ask them what they wanted in the next local plan that we're putting together. So there was a load of questions. People could answer it online as well or in person. And I'm really pleased to see the responses we received. So we had around 2,500 people respond to our issues and options document. To put that into some context, when we last did the issues and options for our previous local plan in around 2018, compared to then, we've had a 368% increase in engagement, which I think is fantastic numbers. Various different stakeholders responded. We've also had lots of response from developers, as you can imagine, as well. And we put all the responses in this document. It's a big old document. There's lots of key themes coming out here. A few of them that really stand out to me. It's clear that the residents of Lichfield District who responded to this are in agreement in our policy. So our policy is a kind of a new way of looking at spatial strategy, infrastructure first, community-led developments, plus also the idea of putting together a new settlement in the future, so building a bigger development that will suit Lichfield District in the next 10, 20, 30 years to come. So yeah, the responses were very positive towards what we have in mind for our local plan, and it's helped guide and confirm the path we're going down is definitely the right one. I won't go into all the responses because there are hundreds of them, but if you've got any questions.
If you were to sum up the responses sort of thematically, how would you summarise them?
Good question. Well, I mean, the key themes are actually in 3.6, so that they are the main themes. But the number one, I would say, is that they are in favour of our direction. There was questions about the period, the plan. So our proposed period goes from 2022 to 2043 for various different technical reasons. Some suggested it should be increased to 2045 or 2050 to allow some flexibility in the plan. But in terms of our kind of housing requirements, the general feeling from people was that the government's calculation that they've given Lichfield is too high, and people are saying they don't want to build, don't want us to build as many houses as the government are asking us to build. You might remember that the new NPPF suggested Lichfield should be building 160% more houses than we were going to before, which effectively takes us from around about 280 a year to around about 750. So the feeling was that's a lot. But yeah, generally people prefer our spatial approaches, as I said, a new settlement as opposed to urban sprawl, and a variety of other things, protecting the green belt, and then some various different kind of local responses. We've had a lot of responses from areas, for example, in Fradley, they came forward with lots of responses. Burtonwood came forward as well with lots of responses. So yeah, but lots of really positive stuff for us to take away.
Smith, any other question?
Yeah, thank you, Alex, and thank you, Doug. Yeah, like Alex, I've been through the paper and I've read the hundreds of responses individually. I haven't read it. I've read the officer summary, so thank you very much for that. It was what I needed. I think for me, what has strongly come across from the responses is the fact that our residents, especially, completely agree with our strategy of a new settlement within Lichfield District. It's no secret that the government has given us some very aggressive new housing targets to meet in our district, and there's no point of sitting here arguing against that. Those are the rules, and that's what we've got to achieve. So I think there's two main reasons for a new settlement. One is it's what our residents would expect us to do and what they agree with. We can see that from the responses. And let's be quite clear, we're sat here today to bat on behalf of our residents. That's the main reason we're here, and that's what we're going to do with this. And secondly, I believe, and Alex, you can confirm to me, I believe that the new settlement approach on the local plan is the best way to reach these very aggressive housing targets that the government has provided with us. And what's really obvious to me, both from the responses here and from just my work as a local ward councillor, is that nobody in Lichfield, none of our residents are interested in any more urban expansion of our village and town centres. That's Woodrow and Lichfield City. The other advantage, of course, is the infrastructure side of it. One of the big things this came across in the responses, and has also come across in what I hear, is people's concern about infrastructure. So there's a definite concern that all of the new housing in Lichfield have been built, and infrastructure is kind of always playing catch up. And I think that's probably a genuine concern as well. With the new settlement approach, the infrastructure needs to be in there first, and that's a real difference and turnaround about how we do that. So that's another good reason to go down the new settlement route. Finally, I know there's a sort of there's two parts to our housing requirements. There's the numbers we have to achieve over the length of the plan period. The new settlement can achieve, and urban expansion won't achieve. But of course, then there's the other side of it, which is the housing supply within sort of 5-10 years during that plan period to keep up. And obviously, the new settlement will struggle to keep that early years housing supply going. However, I think there's a definite, serious and correct case to be made that if we do the new settlement, yes, we may struggle in the early years to do the housing supply, but eventually we will get those required housing numbers. And I think that's the argument that we will use when we're trying to get our plan approved. So thank you for that, Alex.
I'll come back slightly there.
Easy.
So completely agree with everything you just said, Councillor Smith. So there's a real feeling out there in Lichfield District that people want to see an end to urban expansion, and for loads of reasons. Infrastructure, you've already mentioned, is really important. And when we talk about infrastructure, it's not just roads, but that's really important as well. But it's also local schools, doctors, dentists, and people don't want to see communities just being extended and extended. They want to see a real plan for a spatial strategy of where housing goes. And most people we speak to are pro housing, but in the right areas. So a new settlement would definitely do that. And we've engaged some experts to help us as a district get to that new settlement, hopefully in an easier, more comprehensive way. Because, as you said, the problem with a new settlement is it takes a long time to come on stream. And with these new housing numbers that are being imposed upon us, it has taken our current land supply down to less than 5 years, whereas before that it was around about 11 years. So basically the government saying we need to build 160% more housing in the district has taken a big chunk off our current building numbers. So we will of course need to kind of infill that with some housing between now and when this new settlement arises. But I think it's clear from this document that people think the new settlement is the right approach, and that's the one we're going to be heading for kind of with great gusto.
Cox and then James.
Thank you. Councillor Smith has really covered a lot of the concerns there, and thanks, Councillor Farrell, for the response. I'm still very concerned in a sense with these arbitrary figures that we're getting far more than we possibly deal with, and unless there's a blanket release of possibly Greenbelt. And I'm concerned about Greenbelt because the Greenbelt that we have is very important to stop that urban sprawl to the conurbations. And I think it's very important that is clearly recognised. And I take dislike to the terminology that's now been coming through after many years of now hearing the words grey belt. Well, what's grey? As far as I'm concerned, it's a chink in the armour against the green belt. And if we're not careful, by acknowledging it and moving forward, accepting grey belt, we will erode our own green belt that we have, protecting our communities around, that is so important. Again, what I think is being said in the document of answers. So to me, the green belt should be paramount, and grey belt, quite frankly, my opinion, whether it's collective or not, should be dismissed in hand. Say, sorry, we've got our own plans for our own communities within the Lichfield district.
I could just come back there. I completely agree. I've just been doing a search through the responses, and Greenbelt was mentioned 47 times in the responses, so it's clearly something that's very important to our residents. And around 50% of Lichfield district is Greenbelt, so it's, you know, the hell of a lot of land to potentially give away if that's what the government want us to do. There's definitely talks of them saying we should build on Greenbelt. I'd obviously be completely against it, and I'm sure the rest of the cabinet would be as well. And you know, this Greybelt mystery, they've given a I'd say a vague definition of what it is, but to me it's just it seems not suitable going around the edges of the green belt. So I completely agree. I think we should protect it at all costs.
Thank you. Can I just come back on one other question? I didn't want to sound too parochial, but it was a comment that was made in answering question 17, and I'm just trying to get my head around, because it applies to the same, where they say employment, Armitage with Handsacre and Fradley. I'm wondering exactly what that answer to that question was, because I'm struggling to relate to it. Obviously, Fradley has extraordinary amount of employment, but in terms of Armitage with Handsacre, we're very proud. Obviously, we've got a very big factory in terms of ideal standard, or should I like to call it Armitage Shanks. But beyond that, if you were to create development, guess what? You're going into the green belt. So I want to be sure that we're not, again, looking at options that may suggest that we release Greenbelt for employment.
Agreed.
Janice.
My point was very much on the same vein. I do think the amount of responses that we've had here does show exactly the strength of feeling with regards to development that's taken place already within Lichfield district, whether we liked it or not, whether we wanted it or not, but equally what it must entail going through into the future. So I think that, you know, being able to have this consultation has been very welcome in the first place, as it should be. Piece on the green belt, I think, however, is causing a certain amount of anxiety out in the communities, and especially those that represent rural communities as part of our district council members. So in terms of the actual the green belt review, is there anything that you can share at this point, or is it still yet too early with regards to that review that's going to take place, and as far as timeframes and engagement? Or even when there might be the hope of something that is going to be a bit more indicative of what grey belt actually is, because I think that also is causing angst out in the communities who do feel that threat already. It might be too early, but if there's something that you could add at this point, that would be really helpful.
Yeah, in terms of exact timeline, I might have to bring an officer in to help me. But this was, we're looking back now to the issues and options document from late last year. The next stage in the process is what we're going through now, is going through all the different issues that would face a district putting together a local plan. Green belt and grey belt are on there. Yeah. So we're going through the reviews at the moment, with a view to after the summer going to the next stage of actually looking at the call for sites and kind of making some more firm decisions based on the soundness of each site. But in terms of the actual Greenbelt review, which I think is going on currently, I don't know the timeline. Lucy, can you help with that?
Been commissioned and consultants are working on it at the moment. It's due to be completed in June, so I would expect there'll be consultation that will commence in May, but I haven't got the exact timeline. The work has been commissioned, so the consultants are working on it now.
Thank you.
That's all us.
Yeah, thank you, Doug.
I think, Alex, the first thing to say is congratulations to all of the team that have put all of this work together, because it is a phenomenal piece if you look at all of the components of that. So I think a great job has been done so far, so well done to all the team on that. And to pick up on Janice's point, the fact that there's been so many responses, 2,500 or thereabouts, it shows that the public are really keen to engage, because this is such an important topic for them. And again, when I'm visiting people on the doorstep and talking to people, it's still, from when it was talked about a few months ago, it's still live in their minds. In a particular place, the rural areas in particular feel under threat here, and therefore we need to do everything that we can to protect people from that. In with the consultation as well, the pleasing thing was that I think it was Chase Terrace and King Edward schools that's engaged with something like 100+ pupils, and again we must remember that we need to find a way to engage with younger people, because they will be the people who buy properties in years to come, and where they'll be. So I think the whole exercise has been pretty fantastic, to be fair to everyone. And the responses, if we look at to review and comment on the outcome of the issues and options consultation, there was no real surprises to me when I saw that. I saw that residents had one particular view, which is basically don't build in the green belt and we don't want any further development, whereas developers have got the opposite view to that. So there was no surprises there as far as I saw. But the whole thing as put together is logical, it's understandable, and I think the public have engaged really well, and we should work on the back of that to continue that consultation. Thank you.
Yeah, if I could just respond and say, see on the developers, yeah, you're quite right. The developers gave the responses we expected them to give, but you know, it's more important, I think, to me to listen to what the people that live in our district want, and you know, that's the main takeaway I've got from this. In terms of who we engage with, you know, I mentioned earlier, you know, we went far and wide, and thanks to the team who came up with lots of fun ideas to reach more people, including going to pubs. I strangely wasn't invited to that day, but also, you know, going to libraries and community centres and leisure centres. But as you said, we went to 2 schools and spoke to you know, children who aren't old enough to vote, but they will in 10, 20, 30 years be living in these houses that we're planning to build. So it's really important we speak to the next generation and find out what they want. And yeah, and then that's come through in spades on this consultation, and their responses were well, you know, well thought out and measured. So yeah, I really appreciated that.
That's a second.
Thank you. Alex, thank you for the paper, and it's very obvious this is part of a very broad and very robust evidence base that's going to be driving us towards what will hopefully be a resilient and well thought out local plan. And I'd like to thank you and your team for the work on that. I think also at this stage it's appropriate for us and us all as a cabinet to thank all of the members of the public who've engaged with us in this, because it really really is a very impressive piece of consultation. What really leapt out, and I'm going to be nakedly parochial, I heard Richard step back from that. What really leapt out at me is that members of the public are completely sick of the previous policy of urban extension, and quite frankly I am too, in that I'm fed up to the back teeth of governments telling us that we've got to build when we don't necessarily have anywhere natural that's going to come forwards, then bolt on poorly connected developments with poor infrastructure, and then the government telling us, oh no, you haven't built enough, you've got to build some more. And so I'm sick of this district effectively growing with a large number of identikit, smallish homes that are bolted badly onto existing settlements. But where I'd like some reassurance, because you're aware that Longdon is largely washed over Greenbelt, and I noticed in the call for sites responses, there's a site with 100 homes that connect through the back of a field off the edge of the central village. That feels like it's potentially the transfer from urban extension to rural extension, and would require Greenbelt release. Could you give me some reassurance that that is not and will not be a policy of this council as we go?
Yes, well, I'm very happy to give you that reassurance. As long as I'm in the role, we wouldn't be looking to do that at all. I think that it's a very difficult one with the Greenbelt situation, because we're currently in a situation where the government have pledged to build 1.5 million homes in this current parliament, and they clearly are way behind that. You heard that from when Rachel Reeves gave her should we call it a mini fiscal statement recently, that I think they're panicking that they're not building enough homes, and that's a problem, I think, for Lichfield District, because the more sites that come forward, you referenced the call for sites, we had around 140 people put their arm in the air a few months ago to say they want to build in Lichfield District. Now, lots of those sites will completely be unsound sites. There'll be some that are sound, but there's going to be those in the middle that are sites we'd naturally refuse because they are maybe on greenbelt or greybelt land or not in an appropriate area, but we might feel forced to either accept or we might reject, and then it goes up to higher powers, and the government might say, actually, you need to build there, and that's my concern. So I'd reassure your residents in Longden that actually we wouldn't be running that as a policy, but anything can happen, I think, in this current climate and the current direction of the government. It is slightly worrying for somewhere like Lichfield District. Got to build so many homes. They're telling us to build so many homes, so there's only so much we can do with the space that we've got. I think that if you go on the call for sites, there is a very nice interactive map on our website, and I'd ask anybody who's interested to go on there, just type in Lichfield District call for sites, and it's very comprehensive. You can have a look at all the proposed sites around the district, but as we said earlier, I completely agree with your candid comments. People are sick of urban expansion. They're sick of housing estates being dumped on their borders with no infrastructure. The roads haven't changed, no extra schools. There's now an extra 10 people in the 8 a.m. queue for the doctors. That's the virtual queue, of course, over the phone, not the physical one. And people are sick of it. So anything we can do as a district to create a better local plan that's fit for local people, that's infrastructure first, community led, I think is for the better. And that's why I go back to the concept of a new settlement. I think is the only way forward for us.
Your question?
It does.
Brilliant. One case. Final comment from me then, Alex, and it is just a comment in that we've spoken previously at length about our local plan process, in that people only tend to get excited about it at the very, very end of that process. And of course, when it's perhaps even out the back end of that process, when it's all been through and approved, and actually people only see the evidence of that maybe a decade later when they see building work taking place outside their homes. And the challenge was for us to get people excited about it much earlier on in the process, so that people genuinely feel like they've got some involvement and some level of voice, I suppose, in that process. I think the fact that you and the offices particularly have managed to get such a high volume of responses at a stage in the process where typically we don't have that level of engagement with residents, I think is just brilliant. And I think if we can keep that level of engagement up, residents really will feel like they're starting to get a voice in the shape and development of our district. So massive thank you to you, and particularly to the officers for the level of engagement you've done on that. Really, I think our residents will really appreciate it.
Yeah, I completely agree, and it's fair to say, of course, that we can't please everyone all the time. There are going to be some developments that come forward in the local plan that isn't going to please everyone, but the key with consultation is that we listen to the responses, and that's what we're going to do. And then the next step for us is to speak to again to local residents, to local ward members, to find out what really works for them in their area. So yeah, I think the consultation is massively exciting, and will help us shape the district, and we will endeavour to listen to everyone's comments.
With you then for the recommendations, please.
Yep, that's 2.1 and 2.2 in my name.
Thank you. And support them if you can indicate that, and we can see that's unanimous vote. Thank you very much, Councillor Farrell. Right, that brings your bit of the agenda to a close. If there's anybody that's only come to listen to Alex's not you, Andy, you've got to stay. Councillors reckon with you now. First of all, for the social value.
Thank you, Leader. The report does pretty much set out the scope of the policy, and Sarah Carrington, who's the procurement manager, is unable to join us this evening. So you're going to have to put up with the combined efforts of me and Anthony. If there are complicated questions, we might need to write to you. I am grateful to Sarah and to Jared Freeman, who've been the policy leads on this, and also to the support that we received from the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, who looked at it. While that didn't necessarily lead to the policy being amended, it did significantly add to our depth of understanding and knowledge in the area, particularly around the policies in Essex, in Preston and Leeds, and the donut economics framework that we've learned from Leeds City Council. Social value, unfortunately, is not codified or defined by the very act that creates the obligation. And so we've actually taken the definition from the Sustainable Procurement Task Force, and you'll see it within the paper, that it's not only achieving best value through contracting and procurement, but also bringing the best benefits to society, the economy, and minimising the environmental damage of any of the things that we do. It's already in action at this council. It already plays a role within our procurement because it forms a percentage of the weighting when we're assessing any bids for projects. There's a table on page 359, which sets out the proposed weighting of where that will be as this policy progresses. It's also actually already bearing fruit in this council. We have quantifiable social value commitments to a value of £3.2 million, and that is monies that would not otherwise be available but for the presence of that policy within this council's way of working. And in the context of the fact that we spend approximately £15 million a year on goods, services and works, you'll see it's a significant additional percentage. And social value is built on that concept of additionality. It's what else can a prospective partner or supplier add beyond bare performance on the contract to help us meet our obligations under the relevant statutes, but also to bring the best possible value and best possible quality of life, really, to residents across this district. We've actually included a specific example within Appendix C. That was the Cawarden demolition of the multi-storey car park, which pledged a social value amount and then far outstripped it. It also recycled 99% of the materials from the area, which is quantifiable and is within the software, and it delivered a number of world champion dancers right here in Lichfield for a dance school who would otherwise not have been funded to compete in the Netherlands. And so that's really a very true example of how social value can work, and one that we are very, very proud of. We're required by statute to achieve maximum public benefit. I believe this policy sets out what we're already doing, and with the accompanying guidance shows that we are already doing it very well right here in Lichfield. We're also, incidentally, one of very few districts who appear to be committing to this and committing properly, because most of the examples that we've seen are either from top tier or large metros. And so really are trailblazers as a district here, and we're looking forward to continuing the good works. I'm sure there will be questions. There is.
Thank you, Councillor Strachan.
Sorry, Anthony, was there anything you wanted to add?
Questions. First of all, over to you.
Another paper that fascinating to see how we can actually go through the mechanics of figuring out some of the detail in there and certainly quantifying them with those figures. We're being asked to approve it, and I'm more than happy to do that on what we're seeing presented in front of us. And I absolutely agree that there is a level of responsibility in local government in all that we do. And I think this is helping to actually explain that and make that a more public facing opportunity as well. At the most recent Business Boost event that we had, I think it gave us opportunity to speak with some of those local operators. And equally interested in here, in part of what I'm doing elsewhere in some of my councillor responsibilities as well, is looking at how it local is classed. So is it Lichfield District, is it Staffordshire, or even is it the wider West Midlands area as well? So I think that it is really good to be able to see and quantify some of that information. I'd be keen to know, as a question, how we are communicating that with a number of the organisations that we're working with, and how they can see some of the benefit of having that information made available to them. And also it's mentioning, and I think in fact you mentioned this yourself as well, that we're already doing a number of the different initiatives in here. But again, making that statement and making that public information is helpful. As far as the invoices and things like that in the Staffordshire wide, it mentions about that there's no baseline as yet. it's a new operation that we're looking at. I'd be keen to see that later on as well, and just to give an idea of when and how that will also be promoted. But if I can just finish on one, so there's a couple of questions there with regards to engaging with the organisations and that invoices. The example on the multi-storey car park I thought was particularly revealing. And if we look at the social value agreed, that we're looking at 4,000 and we actually achieved 206,000. This is a phenomenal amount that we're able to report on there. And I think that celebrating that is definitely something that we should be doing more of. Thank you.
Being with that last one, if we include the reduced vehicle trips via disposal of the waste rather than recycling, which we actually did, the social value of that contract actually exceeds $1 million against 4,000 pledged, and so it's a really fantastic project. Dealing with a little bit of probably a bit of a history lesson, is that Victorian concept of the great public benefactor bringing goodness and light where the corporation couldn't went out of fashion in the 20th century, and so it's good to see that coming back, and positive and effective social value delivery in this council is made possible and most effective through our partners and our suppliers and companies that we work with taking their social responsibility seriously and effectively public altruism, and that is how this is going to be best deployed. I will let Anthony pick you up on how that's best promoted and communicated to people who we're working with, and if Anthony can't, then we'll get Sarah to write to Cabinet. Within the paper, you can see how we tier local and how we actually measure that, so to try and keep it as measurable as we possibly can. But yeah, there are some real success stories possible here, and it's good to see that it's moving in the right direction. It's not something that's simply being pushed down on us. The relevant act was obviously the previous government, but it's not being pushed down to us by government. We're actively choosing to pick up and run with, and it seems to be going very well. I'm sure Anthony can pick up on the policy issues of how we actually engage with our suppliers, and if you can't, we'll deal with that elsewhere.
So I think, as Councillor Strachan said, we employed a social value coordinator. There's not many, I'm not aware of any other district councils that have done that. That's quite an important role. So it's not only measuring the value of social value and internal communication and internal development of policy. Quite a large part of that role is to engage wider. So we provide case studies now that we put on the website. I think Councillor Strachan was in one of those case studies. That coordinator also attends networking events with other councils. We have things like Meet the Buyer events that we do. It's on the website. Every procurement that we do, it's mentioned in the specification or in the engagement with the potential suppliers as part of the, so it's quite a wide remit to communicate it, because I think, as Councillor Strachan says, that the scope to generate significant benefits is there. And just on, I think, on the point you made about the invoices, so I always describe it as a bit like a dartboard. So you've got the bullseye, which is Lichfield district. You've then got the outer ring, which starts to be Staffordshire. The numbers we were talking about for sort of spend were 12% within Lichfield district, but that was going up to sort of 40% for Staffordshire. So you can see how the spend is focused very locally if you go with the Staffordshire option, and that obviously then has the benefits to everybody that the spend, so it passes down the supply chain within that area and further multiplies that benefit wider than just the spend we've incurred.
Yeah, there is a case study specifically on the Coordon definition of transport sponsorship, but apparently we're not allowed to publish it because of the election period. But we will be promoting that to actually talk about the good news stories and the art of the possible, what can be achieved. So we will be promoting that after the elections are over. Brilliant
to hear. If I could just have one quick follow-up comment as well, please. Certainly in terms of all of those elements on there, you just think, I can think of lots of conversations I've had with local businesses who would definitely come under that particular part, who maybe have been not served well by some contracts with other very much failing local authorities, that would really benefit, and genuinely local businesses that have local employment. And I can definitely see the merit in the trailblazing side, and I do hope that other local authorities watch and learn.
And you'll get me tub thumping on the benefits of small districts versus large unitaries.
That's why I finished it. Thank you.
Bill.
Yeah, thank you, Doug. Picking up on Janice's point, that was one of my questions about the involvement with suppliers on this, and how we've engaged with them and what their response would be. Because for some of them, it will be a major change and I guess a no-go area for some, whereas others will embrace it. So that's one of my questions, and I think you've partly answered that. You've not all answered it. And then the other one was 3.4, looking at the balance scorecard. I've had some previous involvement in balance scorecards, and there was a lot of quality measures in a previous history that I had with those scorecards, whereas here we are concentrating predominantly on financial. I just wondered if it had crossed the mind to maybe look at extending what the KPIs would be to look at more quality aspects as well, not just financial.
Yes, I'm sure we can do, and I'll take it back and see whether we'd like to build that in. It may be something that comes in on a subsequent review.
Thank you.
I'll just add to that as well. Sarah's looking at updating the procurement strategy we've got in place. It's interesting you mentioned that, because one of the points that we've made is we need to look at those KPIs because they're largely based on the procurement strategy from 5 years ago, when social value wasn't as focused as it is now, and you couldn't measure it as easily. So your point's well made in that going forward, social value is a more important part of the procurement strategy, and therefore the KPIs need to reflect that when we bring that forward.
Richard, sorry, you had indicated.
No, I had. It's a comment and probably seeking clarification as well at the same time. If we go to page 359 at 1.9, and I'm looking at B, and terminology I would find being rural communities flourish rather than villages. And the reason I say that is that a lot of our districts, actually, we have a lot of rural dwellings and so forth that are actually not villages. And I'm wondering, to encapsulate the district as a whole, that is something that we could, I'm just playing with words maybe, but I think it's essential, it's important. Everybody knows I bang on about rural communities, and to me, rural communities is a better way of phrasing it, because we could be leaving out sector.
I would be perfectly content to make that change.
Yeah. Thank you. And then if I go to D, it frightens me, this does. It can mean two things. Create the greenest district in the country. Well, greenest in the terminology that we have currently means that we'll splatter solar farms all over the place and we will be the greenest in the country. I wouldn't think that is an appropriate way of doing things. I don't know how that fits in. I just don't like the terminology.
It's a phrase that's taken from the Lichfield 2050 strategy, which obviously is a document that we took through through this place some months ago. In terms of its delivery, I shall unfortunately have to defer to the relevant cabinet member.
Sorry, it's a curveball.
But where social value and procurement can play its part in that, then we'll look to do so. We certainly don't like the concept of solar farms everywhere either, not least because they look like they're the greyest district.
You're not really going.
Something for us to pick up another time, but
It is, and I do
in terms of that policy, yeah. Okay. Phil, back to you.
Yeah, sorry, one question I should have asked about the examples and the case studies. We've seen the one for Coordin, but you mentioned that there are others available as well.
Yeah, there are currently 17 different contracts that are delivering at the moment. I didn't bring with me specific examples of those, but if you'd like them, then we can circulate them after this meeting.
Are they on a website or somewhere?
Some of them are. We've definitely published some. Yes, you have it, Laura.
Yeah, so as and when they're happening, we're promoting. There's been a video that's been done on the latest one, but due to Perda and Rob's involvement in the video, we can't share that at the moment. So post May, we've got quite a few lined up, and we've also got a new section of the website that will be live from next week, which is all around Our Community Can, and all of the case studies are on there and examples of the work.
Thanks. I look forward to looking at that to give a balance. We've got the Monster Coordin one, which is wow, off scale, and it would be nice to see something on an everyday basis that we come across day in, day out.
Stephen?
Thank you.
No, brilliant. Let's move to the recommendations, then, please.
I move recommendations 2.1 and 2.2 standing in my name.
Great. Yeah, we support that. Brilliant. That's unanimous. Thank you very much, Councillor Strachan. You then. Next up, we've got highlights of this evening. Roll, please. Pension contributions.
Very day. I've also just managed to delete my notes on this. Every few years we have an actuarial calculation of our pension fund set by an independent pension fund actuary, and the most recent one suggested that rather than being slightly overfunded, the pension fund was significantly overfunded, and therefore we are in a position where we can start to make slightly reduced contributions towards that. There are 4 options set out within the document. We are leaning very strongly towards option 2B, which is a slightly accelerated reduction. It does have a minor risk that it may go up again quite rapidly at the end of this period, but that risk is felt to be tolerable at this stage. On a purely policy basis, the MTFS that we've just taken through is founded on the presumption that contributions will be at a certain level. This change would have the benefit of meaning that we would have significantly less locked away in a pension fund, and therefore we would have more available funds to deliver our policies across the area. On the actual actuarial, that's quite difficult to say. Actual actuarial elements and assessments, I am going to defer to Anthony as the actual qualified accountant. Is there anything that you'd like to add?
No, all I'd say is that all 4 options have been put forward by the actuary. They're not us dictating to the actuary, so this is an independent valuation. The actuary is comfortable that all 4 options would meet the funding objective for pension fund, which is a minimum funding requirement of 80%. So it's purely a choice for the council as to which of the 4 options it would like to take and whether it would like to forward fund that and get an even bigger discount as well, which is what the option 2B assumes.
Questions?
Yeah, sort of reminds me a little bit about the pandemic and that, and we're now in a world that's completely upside down, and I'm just wondering, given the turmoil that we're seeing around us, hopefully it'll be very short-lived, but who knows, are we comfortable that this actuarial decision is the right way to go at this particular moment in time?
I believe so. I agree with the expert in the field, and we will listen to experts when they advise us in certain directions. Talk with that.
I'll just add as well, the actuary is projecting forward over a 20-year period. So within that period, they will make an assumption that there will be ups and downs that should even out over the period. I'm touching wood there because, as you say, at the moment, there's a lot of volatility.
Just felt it's a question worth asking if we're happy to go ahead on that. No, because we didn't know when this paper was written.
Yeah, I mean, the actuary will take account of quite a number of risks. I mean, they run some, I can't remember the exact number, it's something like 3,000 scenarios when they're doing this. And so there will be these peaks, troughs within those scenarios to get the recommended option they put forward. So, you know, as they are the experts here and they are looking forward 20 years. So, say, hopefully the volatility we're seeing at the moment will even out a 20-year period.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was exactly my question. And the use of the word volatility is just one of those at the moment where it's an absolute given. I think probably from when some of these computations were actually run, and the world is again a very different place to what it was. But I think it does give you scope in here for those different options, and equally to move from being moderately over to being generously over is also some, I think for me, reassurance in that current sense of volatility that we're experiencing here and now, today, yesterday, in particular, is something that I would say would also have been given opportunity within that space of being realistic. And so I think that we are still in the realm of being able to make those informed decisions in a world that is changing by the hour.
Super.
I have, but it's not worth saying.
Okay.
Self-aware.
Back to you then for recommendations, please, Rob.
Thank you, Leader. I move recommendations 2.1 through to 2.4 that stand in my name.
Brilliant. Again, all in favour. That is going to be unanimous. Thank you very much, Councillor Strachan, and thank you, Anthony.
Thank you, everyone.
And that concludes the business for